Did you hear this part?
Yeah.
Welcome back to the Good Dude, Good Dad podcast. I am Jordan.
And I'm Ben, and today's guest is...
Shawn Isbell.
Shawn.
Happy to be here.
I'm stoked that you're here. We took last week off. We're really excited about it, actually. And we get to have our good friend Shawn on.
Couldn't be happier to be here.
Which, little backstory, we already talked about it, but my cousin and him went to school together.
Yep.
And Jackie probably don't even listen to this, but maybe you'll listen to this.
No,
one.
we're going to make her listen.
There we go. And yeah.
We're going to get all her thousands of followers. Yeah, for sure.
It's cool because Shawn beats me up when I do make it to the gym. So that's a good thing.
Lies.
But go ahead and just kind of tell us about yourself. Give us a little backstory and what you do, and we'll kind of get at it.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I just have to start this whole thing with just saying thank you guys both for not only setting this whole thing up and inviting me to be here, but giving good dudes, good dads a platform to hopefully I say something here that inspires somebody, gives them a better day or a better outlook. And so I'm very glad to be here. But just a little background. Well, the way that maybe I should say how Ben and I met is at the gym. And so and Ben is very easily a guy that you meet for 5 minutes and you just want to be best friends with. So, but yeah, I would support anything that Ben's doing. If we're all marching off the cliff, I'm second in line. So,
oh my goodness.
No, seriously, very very good guy, and great to meet Jordan here too. And I just so very great to be here. So my story is kind of I grew up for the most part in Irvine. A very well-to-do city. I was very blessed to grow up there, but I was raised by a single mother. I have an older brother, and life was kind of, we were blessed in the sense that we grew up in a nice city, but it was also kind of tough keeping up with the Joneses. My mom made a lot of sacrifices for us on a single income to make sure that we lived in a very nice city. But nevertheless, one of the things that my mom did as a career for a great while I was growing up was she was an emergency dispatcher. So she would be gone quite a bit, and my brother and I, even at an early age, talk about, hopefully mom's not watching this because I don't mean to throw mom under the bus, but yeah, from an early age, me and my brother were kind of, we became fairly self-sufficient. My brother was cooking meals at 7 years old and doing all of our own laundry and a lot of things that a lot of kids that age probably aren't doing, and a lot of that is kind of come around full circle and help serve me, I think, in a lot of ways. But yeah, I didn't grow up like a lot of other kids. I kind of recycled the same 5 outfits every day, and birthdays rolled around and it was like a no-brainer for me. I was getting clothes. I was always just trying to keep up with the wealthy kids that I went to school with, but and so I tell the sad stories, but to tell the truth, my childhood was amazing. I grew up in a neighborhood where, granted it was in Irvine, but just about everybody that I lived with in my neighborhood, it was like the only community that accepted low-income housing. So most of my friends were in similar situations as I was. They were, a gaggle of kids with, one parent. And so I think it created this huge bond between us. And my childhood was actually amazing. Kind of getting to the point of where I'm feeling like the king of the world. My brother started getting into some trouble. Frankly, I was doing a lot of the things that he was doing. I think I was just maybe a little bit better at not getting caught. So. But yeah, I was making a lot of mistakes. Granted, I don't think I was a horrible person, but I just think that I was just flying by the seat of my pants, and didn't really grow up with a strong connection to God, and I was just kind of a person that I think a lot of people kind of struggle with. Well, what does it all mean? I didn't care what it meant. I was just like, I'm here, and just kind of doing my thing. And then my junior year, when I was really feeling like the king of the world. I was playing basketball in high school, and I had a lump in my leg. And so I had noticed, Frank, this is going to sound really stupid to a lot of people, but mind you, I was 17 years old. So I noticed I had a little lump in my leg, but I was very private. Back in those days, people wore gym shorts down to the middle of their shin.
Yeah.
So I wasn't showing anybody, my upper thigh for sure. But I just so happened, because, me and my brother were troubled youth, we ended up getting my mom kicked out of the apartment that we were living in. And because of that, during the move, I happened to without demonstration here, you got to kind of imagine if I kind of sat up against the wall, and when I did that, my shorts kind of rode up my leg, and my mom's friend saw a big bump on my leg. And so she, was like, "Hey, what is that?" And so I'm, super embarrassed, covering it up. "Oh, it's nothing, it's nothing." And so now my mom knows about it and is like, "Whoa, like we need to figure that out." And truthfully at the time, like my motivation was like, "Oh man, like I want to finish my basketball season. I want to just, I was heading into my senior year. Like that was not what I wanted to spend my time doing." But even what I thought it was like a bunched up muscle. And I thought they were going to go in and give me a couple snippy snips and I'd pretty much be back to normal. And so that wasn't the case. But, kind of fast forward to the end of my school year in my junior year, I was working at a really fine restaurant establishment you guys might have heard of. It's called McDonald's. And so I was working there, I was working at the window, very happy. My friends would come through, and it was a cool place. And at that time, my mom, everything was kind of ramping up with my leg. But even as it was kind of ramping up, I still just never had fully. My 17-year-old brain would only let me think so far, and so even when people kind of threw around like the cancer word, I was like, okay, well, still, they'll cut that thing out, and I'll be back to normal. So. But we ended up going to my primary care doctor. I think that's probably where everybody starts. And the doctor was, she kind of palpated on it, as I remember, and she even kind of made some joke with me. And I think she really kind of thought it was the same thing I thought. She was like, "Oh, it's like a bunched up muscle." She's like, "Oh, we can cut it out if you want to, haha," but that wasn't good enough for my mom, thank God. And so she escalated things. They finally ended up sending me to a specialist who sent me to another specialist. And I ended up in UCLA with a doctor, a surgeon whose name is Dr. Eckhart. He's since no longer with us, so may he rest in peace. But that man, and along with a bunch of others, is really responsible for why I'm still here today. I'm very, very grateful. So, but I ended up meeting him and so now I'm kind of starting to realize that there's a chance that this could be cancer, and still having no idea like what this all could entail. But I end up getting, pulled into the doctor's office, and I'm not even kidding you guys. It was just like something you've seen on the movies, where I was actually like in a room surrounded by students. Mm-hmm. And then, besides those students, there were several students that he had in tow, hanging on to every word that he said, taking notes. And so it was a lot, but it was also in a weird way. It kind of calmed me down, because I was like, oh, this is an education, like they're just using this. This is no big deal. But I ended up getting a biopsy. And so the biopsy was basically like they took a kind of a needle and took clippings out of my leg. And the idea with that was that, they were going to test this material and figure out whether or not it was cancer. So believe it or not, like when they did that, it wasn't comfortable. And when I walked out of there, I was still thinking, this is probably the worst of it, And so, I went back to my amazing job at McDonald's, and one, this is when like the Nokia phones were around, right?
Yeah.
So, and my mom knew my work schedule very well. She knew how seriously I took, my drive-in, so she ended up calling me several times, as I remember, and I was just like, what the heck? So I ended up asking my supervisor if I could step out really quick to call my mom, and she was in hysterics and told me that I had cancer. And so, man, and it took me a really long time to just kind of digest that. And but she's like, come home, so I came home immediately, and my mom is just like, she could hardly even get a word out.
Yeah.
And so, my instinct, I think, was, not to sound stoic, but I think my instinct was just like, hadn't fully regurgitated all of it anyway. And, just seeing my mom so upset, I was like, don't worry, Mom, it's going to be okay. Like they're going to cut it out and I'll be just fine. And she's like, no, we're going to go in tomorrow and you're having surgery, and they're going to put some tubes in your chest. So they ended up giving me, it's called a Broviac. Similarly, like some people will have like what's called like a portacath that's like actually under the skin. Mm-hmm. Mine was two like rubber lines that looked like, the cords coming off of these microphones that hung down to my, basically to my waistband. And that was going to be a means of me getting my chemotherapy, them doing blood draws, me receiving all of my treatment. At some point in my treatment, it became the means of me eating food. But the idea behind that was that they needed to do that because I was going to be getting so much IV, treatment that they didn't want my veins to collapse.
Right.
So, within an instant, things became very real for me. All the stoicness went out the window, and I was terrified, and so, kind of fast forward to, I guess the next day, because the next day I was, the other blessing there that I should mention is I was 17. So in the minds of the medical world and, a lot of other people, I was still a child. So they treated me very aggressively. At first I was kind of like, what the heck? Like, I'm going to be getting all my treatment at Chalk Hospital.
Yeah.
And I'd enter the hospital and, walk past all the pink flamingos on the wall and, wave at a clown. And, it was like, is this for me? But in hindsight, I'm very grateful because I think not only did I get like amazing care, but man, who knows what my outlook would have been had I been 18 when I got diagnosed. And, so very grateful for that. But, I'll tell you guys, one of my very first experiences at the hospital was, they normally bring you into a room, you sit with somebody they call a candy striper, and they kind of lay out what your experience is going to be, and then they get you up to your room. So, she's kind of laying all this out, and, maybe she's not the nurse, but I'm asking her all the questions, and she's like, oh no, honey, like your hair's going to fall out. And here I am, a bald man for the last, 20 years of my life. But at the time, just like everybody else, I was the frosted tip. So I was like, what? I was already a very small guy, and she's telling me I'm going to lose weight, and I'm like, I don't have any weight to lose. And but all this was becoming very real. They got me up to my room. I think that day they came to get me, and they just by policy they're wheeling me out of there with the wheelchair, and I'll never forget the feeling of like I'm obviously having my own experience, I'm having my own fear, I'm terrified. But also I'm seeing like what my mom was feeling, and I just like didn't want her to be scared, So I was trying to make light of the situation. I remember like, when they were finally like wheeling me down to surgery, I threw my hands up like, it's okay, Mom, and then, but I do remember, waking up shortly after my first surgery and asking my mom, do I have tubes in my chest? And she, yeah, you do. And so, for the most part, from then on out, you guys, my life was radically different. Not only was I physically a different person now, but I more or less lived in the hospital for, a little over a year. And there were a few days that I would get to go home. But, even if I was feeling good, oftentimes I'd get a phone call from the hospital. They'd get, my platelet tests back or my white cell back, and they'd tell me, hey, Shawn needs to come back in here and get a transfusion or something. So, but for the most part, how my chemo would work is, and the idea was, and I'm very lucky again, that they used a lot of experimental drugs. The cancer that I had was called Ewing sarcoma, and it was a soft tissue tumor that I luckily, it hadn't yet metastasized itself to my bone, and it hadn't gotten into my bloodstream. So it was pretty much contained in my leg, at least, at that point. And the reason that they decided, not only because I was 17, but also because it was a pediatric form of cancer, that's why I was going to have my treatment there at Chalk. From what I've learned about my particular type of cancer since then is that they normally find it in the upper extremities, and and normally it does metastasize itself, and it can get worse, and there's not a great survival rate. So. Wow. And even at 17, nobody was making any qualms about telling me any of that, you know? So I remember, one of my first visits with the doctor before getting chemotherapy is, probably the most obvious question I asked her was, am I going to die? And I don't think she was a heartless person. I just think that she'd probably been asked that several times and didn't want to sugarcoat it. And so she was like, well, I don't know yet. We'll have to see how you react to treatment. So, it was just, radical, at that time in my life, you guys, as silly as I was as a kid, I was also very healthy, I think, in my mind. I was very active. I was all about my sports. Frankly, I was like the only person in my family that didn't have a weight problem. It was just, to the lowest level, I was like the only person in my family that didn't even wear glasses. Like I just seemed to be kind of an anomaly to at least, the rest of my family and my health. And then I got sick. So it was just so wild. But my very first chemo treatment was very, very hard. It was all of my treatment was in the hospital. So the only times I would ever get to go home is after, I would do like a 7-day cycle, and then there'd be a week in between, so long as I was healthy enough to kind of go through the next round of treatment. But the idea at that point was like they were going to aggressively, poison this thing with chemo in the hopes that it would shrink down enough that they could cut it out of my leg without, destroying my leg or, having to cut my leg off. So, and so, sadly, and even more, fear started to set in when I found out that my chemo wasn't doing anything. It wasn't really working. And all it was doing was just making me incredibly sick. And, I mean, I would, to the point where I would get nervous, driving to the hospital and get sick. I had a really hard time with the chemo and, eating. So it broke me down to a point where they ended up, those same lines, they ended up giving me a backpack that fed me basic nutrients just to keep me from shriveling up. Because, at that time, not that I'm a super large man, I think at that time I was, usually walking around at like 130, and I got all the way down under 110 pounds, which was, I was just so shriveled up. Obviously I lost my hair and my eyebrows, and everything made me sick. You guys, a certain smell would make me sick. Thinking about, getting chemo. Frankly, you guys, like, even when they would clean my lines with saline, the saline would make me sick. I would taste it in my mouth. So they would go, okay, well, let's try heparin. That would make me sick. Everything just made me sick. And, I was 17, so, I think I was able to kind of bond with the nurses and staff on a different level than some of the kids were. And so they would, they weren't being mean. I hope nobody takes this the wrong way, but they would call me the fragile flower. And like, they'd kind of tease that, that I was almost grown and in this area. They'd draw flowers all over the whiteboard and stuff just to pick on me. But at that time, you guys, those same nurses became my friends, my best friends, because it was a very lonely time for me, and excuse me if I get emotional, you guys, but it is, in a weird way, when I talk about this stuff, I feel like I'm talking about somebody else, but in another way, and we kind of talked about this before we were rolling, that I also could go back there in an instant. I explicitly remember the fear. I remember, the loneliness, and I don't begrudge any of my friends, but they were enjoying their senior year, and there were a few times where people would come to see me, and even then I remember the looks on people's faces. I remember my friend Mitchell coming to see me at my house, actually, and I'll never forget the look on his face. And it was like I felt like he was coming to say goodbye, And luckily in my mind, even though I was very scared and like the outlook was very grim at that point, I still, like, in my 17-year-old mind, I think it just wasn't ready to like there's no way this is it for me. Like I'm still going, but I did have my moments where like I almost thought about packing it in. I was just wondering, like, is this all worth it? Like, is this going to be the quality of life? Do I really want to spend my last days like this? Like, just it was I hadn't yet gotten to the phase of where the cancer was really jacking me up. It was the chemo. By no qualms. It was absolutely the chemo that was killing me. And the idea behind that, you guys, for those of you that don't know what chemo is it's poison. And they hope that they can give you enough poison that it doesn't kill you, but kills the cancer first. And and it's this balancing act. And I'm very grateful that they were as aggressive as I was, and that my throwing up didn't stop them from giving me the drugs that I needed. So, but again, kind of fast forward to, I ended up reading the Lance Armstrong book, and I know a lot of people have opinions about him, like, oh, he was cheating. To be honest with you guys, like I could give a crap less about how many Tour de France's the guy won or whatever. But I think what he's done for the cancer community, and that book, what it did for me in that time. it really it inspired me, and it kept me going. And I wear the yellow bracelet that most people probably don't even know what this is anymore. This used to be very popular.
Oh, yeah.
Make sure it's in frame, yeah. But that the live strong sentiment, very it rang with me. It was my very first tattoo was the live strong thing, and I lived by it. I heard you say on one of your podcasts, even just putting on your hat that's a backstop for you. It kind of checks you before you right. And so putting that on my arms was kind of like, I'm like, well, all right, I really gotta live this, and so to my credit, I guess, like, I never missed an appointment. I was always, but there were a lot of times where people had to talk me off of, quitting, because I just, it was really, really hard for me. But luckily, that book came into my life, and then all of a sudden, you guys, it's like the same time as, like, I'm not taking credit for anything really, but it was right around that time that things kind of started changing for me, and all of a sudden, they made some tinkers to the chemo that I was getting, and things started working.
Dang.
And it started shrinking. So, when we started, it was like, about the size of my fist. And by the time I was ready for surgery, it was about the size of a golf ball.
Sheesh.
And so I ended up going back to that same doctor, Dr. Eckhart, may he rest in peace. And he was the one who performed my surgery at Santa Monica. And so that surgery was called limb salvage surgery. So, there was no question about it that there was a chance that they were going to go into my leg, and things were maybe not as they seemed on an X-ray, and that they might have to just take my leg. So I signed that document, and I remember going into surgery, and I remember them telling me to do the countdown and everything, and so my very last thought was like, I just want to have my leg when I and like, I just want to play basketball again, and I just want to run again. And yeah, that was like the one thing I was just like, I don't know if I could do the no leg thing. Right. And so I woke up, and, it takes a while for you to kind of become coherent enough to, but I remember kind of, oh God, my leg is still there, So that was a blessing. But what they ended up doing was cutting out I won't show the camera here, but they cut out a very significant section of my leg.
Yeah.
But fast forward to like my biggest hobby now. Ben and I we box together, and so it hasn't hindered me from really doing anything. I definitely have mobility issues with my leg. It'll never I'll never be able to get the strength back in it that I do in this leg, and the flexibility will never be the same, because they just cut everything so that they could get the margins clear, and I think for the most part just reattach things. So it doesn't fire the way that I would like it to, but I stand in an orthodox stance, with my leg in the back. So, my weaker leg doesn't really trouble me. For a long time, I did jiu-jitsu, and I think that helped me in a lot of ways too, to kind of develop some strength in it and get some flexibility. Martial arts has always kind of been a big thing in my life, but I had just fallen in love with the UFC before I had before I got sick, and was like, on my own, I think, kind of just adapting this warrior mentality of like, I have to push through, like, what, and like, my people are counting on me to not give up. My mom wants me to keep pushing. I want to survive. I've got so much to do, and so, dude, as silly as it might sound, like, I had a tube in my chest, and I couldn't walk, but I would use my walker every single day, you guys, to do dips on.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
I going down the stairs, I ended up having to I used my arms a lot, and so in a weird way, like, I actually started getting like health conscious and trying to like take care of myself while I was at my sickest, and so maybe some of that served me. I think definitely the mentality thing served me, and I had the surgery, and then I started recovering. I would PT myself, and I would at that time YouTube was just coming about, just coming about. But you could find some things on YouTube, and so I would actually sleep with my leg in this machine. It was called a CPM machine. I don't know what that stands for, but it would basically put my leg into flexion, and I could turn it up every day, and increase the flexion until finally I was like, able to get my butt, my heel and my butt to touch. But, and so, yeah, as far as side effects go, I'm a really healthy guy now. I'm much more conscious. I think I'm much more appreciative of life in a weird way. Sometimes I tell people I'm very grateful for what happened to me because it just changed my whole outlook, and I have, very human days, where, things do bother me. But I think for the most part, that does serve as a really great backstop for me where I'm able to go, wait a minute, like this doesn't matter, I'm just happy to be here, and so, kind of the reason that I'm here, I guess today is because I just celebrated my 20 years of good health. And Ben, commented on it, was nice enough to be like, hey man, why don't you come on here and tell your story and hopefully inspire some people. So, that's why I'm here. And hopefully that's what this story does. But, I want to make sure also that I'm giving all the gratitude to my medical staff and my friends and my family, who just kept me going, granted, like at that time I didn't have a family of my own. And so, I maybe didn't have as much to lose. If something like that were to happen to me today, it would be, even more terrifying. But I maybe wouldn't feel it as lonely because it was just, it was very, it was just a sad time for me because I didn't have anybody to talk to, and I couldn't talk to my mom about things either because she was kind of having her own experience. And there was lots of times where I would get up and go talk to my mom, and she'd run into the bathroom in hysterics. And but yeah, you guys, the big crucial thing I wanted to share today, and frankly, you guys, like I'm gonna probably lose a lot of people on this when I contemplated whether or not I would even share this moment with people because some people will think that it's not true, or they won't believe it. But I didn't grow up close to God. In a weird way, I always felt, like I knew that there was something else going on. There had to be an explanation for this, but I didn't know what it was, and and never really took the time to kind of like seek those answers. But probably much like other people that are in a situation like mine where they think their life could soon be over. You have a lot of conversations with God, and so I started praying a lot and trying to get to know Him, and anybody that would talk to me about the Lord, I would ask lots of questions, and it was I was ultra interested, and so you guys, one night while I was actually at home, backpack on, sleeping on the couch. I had my IV pole, and one night, you guys, I woke up to the feeling of something sitting on my legs, and when I sat up, the whole room was dark. All I could see was basically a silhouette sitting on my leg. And it didn't say anything to me. It was pretty much like as soon as I saw it, it was gone. But and I believe in my heart that was an angel. And I believe, it was an overwhelming experience. I'm shaking as I tell you guys about it because it was the most impactful thing that had happened to me in my life, up to the point of becoming a father. Because that message became very clear, even though nothing was said, I knew that I was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And so, I end up climbing myself off of the couch, and limping into my mom's room and waking her up. And I physically couldn't even speak. I was just so overwhelmed with emotion. It was joy though, in the weirdest way. And, my mom's like, what's wrong? Like I'm in a bad way. So she's like, do I need to call 911? She's, and I just, finally when I could get the words out, I just remember telling her on repeat, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. That's and I just knew it. I just knew from that moment on I was going to be okay. Another funny thing I should have mentioned, because I was having, these great conversations with people, is this lady that I didn't even know ended up sending me a picture. She sent me a picture of the marquee outside of their church. And this was like in some like deep south, some place I've never been to, and on the marquee it said, "Pray for Shawn." Whoa. And I was just like, oh my God, it was hugely impactful to me. Somebody else, ended up giving me a cross that my mom ended up draping over a family photo of us, and specifically kind of put that cross over me. My mom would ended up making these little angels, these little gems. It's actually this tattoo here on my arm. And she would give them to anybody that she felt had an impact on my care, or so.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And so all of my nurses and doctors ended up with one of these things, and and I've of course tattooed it on my body. But like I guess a lot of people find the Lord when they're in a bad situation.
Yeah.
Luckily I didn't find mine. I didn't find him in jail. But I certainly found him. In a very dark place, and I'm grateful I did. And it's so crazy. Like fast forward to now. They told me I'd likely never get to have kids, and somehow my wife and I made babies. I think that has more to do with her. She's very healthy, eats her leafy greens, and so we made 2 perfect little baby girls, and and I'm living the life now that I never imagined. I'm solely motivated by having time with my kids, and so what you and I were kind of talking about. It's like I know what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I know I need to be working. I know I know I need to be, earning an income and making sure that my kids are okay. But I'm also, playing that balance all the time of like, I want that time with them. I don't want the regret of feeling like, I was in the laptop all the time funny. Like I shared with you guys also, I had a fair amount of insecurity coming here today, speaking on a podcast called Good Dad, a Good Dude, Good Dad, because I don't always feel like I'm a good dude or a good dad.
Yeah.
And especially because, I have a lot of guilt, and as I'm sure you do, or anybody else that survived something, I have a lot of guilt sometimes, and I wonder like, well, why did I get to survive? And ironically, again, one of the things that I found out and was told when I was sick was that I'd likely probably never meet somebody that had the same type of cancer that I did, and I did, and so I don't go down I feel like trying to go down the rabbit hole of like, how did I get sick is Pandora's box, and I'm just grateful to be here. But nevertheless, I was living in an apartment in Irvine at the time, and we had some kind of black mold thing going on where they kind of moved us out of the complex for a while and moved us all back in. And maybe that's a big, no point, but the only other person that I've ever known to have the same type of cancer that I did lived in that same community. So
Whoa.
Somebody kind of reconnected us while I was sick, and his name is Mikey, and rest in peace, he's no longer here with us. And I'm telling you guys, like the salt of the earth kind of guy, just a really, really good human being. And we would talk on the phone about just, kind of comparing our treatments and stuff. And that was always like glaring to me because we essentially had the same cancer, but we were receiving a completely different kind of treatment. And he was jumping on a plane all by himself, because that's what he had to do, and go to Chicago to get treatment, and I think even that kind of gave me, even in the situation that I was in, just stopped making me feel so bad for myself, and find a little something to be grateful for. But yeah, I still deal with that to this day, and just wondering like, well, why did I get to survive, and trying to earn my keep a little bit more, And so now I have 2 beautiful babies and a beautiful wife who like adores me, and I just count my blessings every day, you guys. Like I one of the reasons that I told you I don't always feel like a good dad is I deal with some anger issues. I think a lot of us in that have met at the gym maybe do. And so it's funny. I think a lot of people think that we're we go into the gym and we just punch each other and talk about but Ben's laughing because he knows what it actually is. And a lot of times we sit around the ring or on the mats and we cry, and talk about the things that we've been through, and what we're dealing with, and so that's been a major outlet for me. I do occasionally like to punch people in the face in an organized setting, but
that's funny.
But yeah, I'm trying to raise 2 strong little girls, and yeah, we live in a beautiful city, and they're healthy and happy, and I'm just so grateful. So I now sell real estate with my wife. That there's a kind of a fun story with that too, if you guys don't mind me sharing that bit of it. But
Go for it.
The way that Ben and I met was I was doing some personal training at a gym, and my wife was working for Ryder, the trucking company, and she was killing it, and doing really good. And as her dad likes to say, we kind of took the escalator, and with the I'll give myself this little bit of credit that I thought I could not make children, but we ended up making a baby, and so we found out that we were going to be having a little girl, and there was no question about it. As soon as that baby came out, my wife was going back to work, and and I was going to go back to the gym, and keep trying to cut the mustard. And at that time, you guys, I was a starving trainer at best. I'd be at the gym all day long to try and make $100 a day. I was really having a hard time just getting by, and so I knew I had to do something else. And fast forward again to my daughter actually coming, and my wife kind of coming to me, and her maternity leave had ended, and she's like, "Yeah, I'm not going back to work." I was like, "Oh, okay." And no knock on her at all, you guys. That was a decision that we made together, and not to judge anybody else, but we knew that we didn't want to drop our kids off at daycare all day long, and again, I know that that's a lot of people's situation. No judgment at all. I think, the thing that you learn day one of being a parent is this parenting thing is hard.
Yeah.
We're all trying to figure it out.
Yep.
And you said it on one of the podcasts prior that every day you're a new dad, because every day your kids are older, every day they're doing new things. And so we're all just doing our best and trying to figure it out. So, but yeah, I think we're doing a pretty good job of figuring it out, but my trainer job was not going to cut the mustard at all. So luckily for me at that time, one of my clients, her name was Ruthie. My kids now refer to her as Gigi. I think that's
cool.
It's very sweet. But Ruthie, I was her trainer. I would train her in home, and she was 83 years old, and so at the time, and frankly, she didn't always feel up to doing some exercise, but she was a very goal-driven lady. So on top of her maintaining her certifications for being a nurse at to all the way to 83, she had aspirations of getting her real estate license, and it was really for nothing else than just keeping herself sharp and having goals. And that's so cool. Let that be a lesson to you guys too. You got to have goals. Idle hands. So on a lot of days, you guys, I would show up and she wouldn't feel up to exercise, but I would help her with these flashcards, and it was kind of interesting to me anyway. I never thought that I had the brain for it, frankly, but I always kind of in the back of my mind kind of knew that real estate was a good career. My family in South Carolina, they sell real estate, and they seem to have a good life, So I was like, oh, this is interesting. I'm kind of learning it. Well, at that same time, she was kind of throwing us a bone and was giving my wife some work. My wife would, with my daughter attached to her, would do dishes and fold laundry and help her with things around the house. And then kind of unbeknownst to me, but at some point, as I remember, we kind of were in the car, we put it together that my wife was doing these flashcards too, and so I was like, yeah, I'm kind of learning this stuff. And she's like, yeah, I'm learning it too. And I'm like, have you ever thought about it? And so, we just kind of, at that point, we're like, well, we better do something, And so we started doing the online classes and trying to get the ball rolling for that. And it took us every bit of, 2 years. So we didn't do it super, expeditiously. And by that time I had gotten us into quite a bit of debt, and this is, something I haven't really shared with anybody. I think, not a lot of people knew that, we were struggling like we were. But yeah, I had racked up a personal debt with a friend of mine for like 13 grand. And, he never bugged me about it. I would just kind of float him $20 here and there until I finally got that intact. But a lot of people kept me afloat. And I feel very pathetic about that, especially because I was a new father, but I was having a really hard time, and another thing that happened was my buddy Dustin came to stay with us for a while with his daughter, and he was going through a tough time, and he got to witness my daughter taking her first steps. And cool. So that really became the time, I was already studying at that point, but that was like, okay, nose to the grinder, we're getting through this. That's not okay, Yeah. So we went and took the test. Full disclosure, I didn't pass the first time. You guys, I remember too. It's very just tense, setting. They get you into this room with a bunch of other people, and they take all of your belongings from you and you stuff them into this locker. And then they put you in this room. And I remember the lady telling me, she's like, it's like a 3-hour test, or it can be, And so she's like, if you need to leave the room, raise your hand. We'll come over and excuse you, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just thinking like, all right, like, I'm just going to bang this thing out. Like, 2 hours into that thing, my head was just reeling, and I'm like, hey, can I go on a walk? And so, needless to say, I didn't pass. I go out into the hallway, and I have about, turned out to be like 20 minutes to kind of reconcile how I'm going to react, because my wife, who I know is brilliant, is going to come out clicking her heels, and she's going to pass. And so I can't be, all upset. Well, you guys, lo and behold, my wife comes around the corner and she didn't pass either. So I was like, you didn't pass? I was like almost excited. I was like, yeah, we got this. Let's do it again. It was like, so, yeah, it was weird. And then, and even in that 20 minutes, I watched person after person, walk out with their head down. So, I was like, all right, it's a hard test, and if I just keep going, like, I'll get it. So the second time around, you guys, not only, did I not have to raise my hand to go on a little nature walk, but I got through the test. I went up to the counter, and the lady was like, congratulations. So, but ironically, you guys, instead of having 20 minutes, my wife was right next to me. There's 300 people in the room, but my wife and I ended up at the counter at the same time. So I walk out now, and so now I have the opposite kind of thought going through my head. I'm like, okay, I passed, and what if my wife doesn't now? What if she doesn't now? So I have to like kind of tone it down. Well, she comes around the corner, clicking her heels. And you guys, it was just such a special moment. We took that elevator down, jumping up and down, like, oh my God, we did it. And then it hit the bottom floor, and it's like, now what? Yeah, like, what do we do with this thing? And so we got licensed right at the tail end of 2019. I shared with you, I for a long time, I worked for the fire authority. I was there for almost 10 years in a very large department, and made some really great friendships. And, I fostered a lot of that camaraderie that I think that I was missing and, desiring while I was sick. And I just made a lot of great friendships. But granted, I think also like my heart wasn't really in, I think I went that direction because it was a great career. My mom was working for the fire authority when I got sick, and they supported us in a lot of ways. And so I felt like, I was like, you know what, that seems right. But to be honest with you guys, I wasn't super passionate about running into burning buildings and, all the medical stuff like that. That wasn't very exciting to me. But because I had all these great friendships, basically right after I got my real estate license, one of my buddies was basically just waiting for me so that we could go shopping. So I was able to close. My wife and I were able to close our first deal within the first 2 months of us getting licensed. And then shortly after, you guys came 2020 and the whole COVID era, and what that did here in California for the millions watching around the world is it sent buyers into a frenzy. And a lot of my saltier agent friends were like, you got to get the listings, and not only were the listings at that time fewer and far between, but my friends were first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
They weren't selling $1 million real estate. So we went with the stream, and we ended up closing like 10 deals our first year. And frankly, you guys, not that money is everything, but that was more money than I had ever seen. And it was enough to get us out of the debt that we were in. Full disclosure, the first time my wife and I got paid, they released the check like on a Friday evening, and the office was closed on Saturday. I didn't have the horsepower at that time to even have a key. I tracked down the janitor in this community where our office was, so that he would open the door. It was pouring rain, so that we could get that check. And my wife and I sat in the car for probably an hour, just sobbing like you wouldn't believe. Just like you would have thought this $10,000 check was the lottery, because it we didn't have to eat top ramen that night. It was like, and so it made my wife and I so much closer, and just, I think that having that struggle just made us really appreciate each other, and we did it together, and so, fast forward to now, we've been in business for almost 5 years, and, to date, we've closed, over $200 million in real estate. my wife is obviously the driver. No, I'm not going to lie about that. She kicks the bed every morning and says, let's go. And, her kind of, she's been in Yorba Linda for a very long time, has a very good family with a great reputation. And then, me working with the fire authority and living in Irvine as long as I did, and all my gym friends has really, helped us have a very strong sphere. And I think catapulted us to, a place where, we're not hurting like we were, and we now have 10 agents underneath us that we mentor. That's something that I take a great deal of pride in because, we've been able to help other people, do things for their family. Most of the people on my team are parents themselves. I am passionate about, helping newer agents get their launch, but more than that, we're passionate about, and I think you share this sentiment, like, I want to work with good people.
Yeah.
I can confidently say, like, there's nobody on my team that I don't think would, like, give the shirt off their back to anybody or are just good, solid people, So that makes me feel really good. And I'm just happy to be where I'm at today.
That's awesome.
Dude, you got a crazy story.
Yeah.
I feel like Jordan and I have not ever been this quiet before.
I know I talk a lot, you guys.
No,
I'm so
that
sorry,
was-
but
No, I think what's cool is I just wanted to point out a couple of things, but the cool part about your story is you had every ability and every chance to basically just be like, yeah, I'm gonna play the victim mentality, and I'm gonna feel sorry for myself 24/7. I'm gonna do whatever, right? The victim mentality that we have come accustomed to in today's world, but you took the opposite approach and you kind of dug in. I'm glad you shared the story of your faith journey. Not that everything is about faith. Obviously, Jordan and I have our own faiths, and I love when people share that story because you could have gone one or two ways. Like, went to Jesus or I'm going to hate you, Jesus.
Yeah.
Like, those are the two things, and whatever direction people pick, and that's where they're at. Like, that's your own journey to find out. But I think another thing that I want to highlight, and then you can kind of highlight too, is just, you said it, but the point of, like, being a good dude and a good dad is we're not always going to be at our best. Like, in fact, we're probably going to be at our best the very least. And you making the comment of, like, having those doubts and worries about, well, am I a good dude? Am I a good dad? Like, that shows us right there that you are in the headspace of being a good dude and a good dad, right? We said it right before we started recording. If we didn't have those thoughts, if I didn't have those thoughts, if you didn't say that, Shawn, like, I would literally be like, dude, this guy's a narcissist and
Right.
probably needs
a little dose of insecurity, I think, is good for some of us.
It is, and it challenges us. But I'm thankful you shared your story, dude. Like, I didn't know any of that. So that's something that's so cool about this podcast, and something that's going to continuously, like, happen with Jordan and I is, like, almost all the guests we've had, one of us have known. But sitting in this setting, you get to hear a different side of somebody.
Yeah.
That, genuinely, like, makes me, like, have these provoking thoughts of, whoa, man, like, I shouldn't complain about X, Y, and Z. Or it gave me a greater appreciation for, like, my friendship with you and knowing all that about you. I did not freaking have a clue.
That's super cool. Yeah, it's super. Even though I'm sitting over here doing a good 99% of the talking, I do like to share, because I do find that that it does put us on a different playing field now. I think that hopefully the vulnerability makes you see me in a different light. I think a lot of times the same thing, like, people think we're cavemen, and I did a good job of covering myself with tattoos, and so I didn't do myself any favors that way. But I do at the core of myself, I do think that I'm a good guy, and not to be the narcissist. I think I also struggle with balancing, my time and being a good husband, making sure that my wife feels significant, that my kids feel loved, and sometimes I torture myself with that. But I think you're right. Yeah, we should probably have a little bit of insecurity about that. That's what keeps us honest. That's what keeps me present. So.
Shows that you care.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's, if you're not asking those questions, if you're not questioning yourself, am I a good person? Am I a good husband? Am I a good dad? It means that, you just don't really care. At least that's That would be my opinion, right?
Yeah, no, I agree.
The fact that, I think a lot of times, the more the times we torture ourselves with that kind of stuff means that we just want to get it right.
Yeah. Totally.
I loved, first of all, you're a fantastic storyteller.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
We talked about it off air, but we share a lot of similarities in our story, and hearing you go through that, I had all of that, all those emotions you're describing, I had condensed within like a 24-hour period. And like, you literally brought me to tears a couple times, because it was, like you were saying, it was so long ago, yet like yesterday. It's the same thing with me. It's like I'm going on over 3 years, and it's like, it feels like a whole other person I'm talking about, but at the same time, like you would say certain things, and it would bring that emotion back instantly.
Of course.
When you're talking about, like, you had that experience where, you felt like there's an angel sitting on your legs. I had that same, not that same exactly, but something very, very, very similar as I was being wheeled into surgery. And it was like, that hit me instantly. But, and that was just such an incredible story.
Well, I really appreciate that, you guys. And I'm telling you, like, I have certainly never said that in a public setting, but I've said that to very, very few people. And I just felt like it was really important for me to kind of, either oust myself as a crazy person, or hopefully resonate with those that, that believe like I do, because it absolutely, it happened. I felt it. And God is real, you guys, and like, one of the messages that I wanted to send people, if you haven't felt that closeness to God, like, I would suggest that you lean in just a little bit, and
open that door a little bit.
Yeah, just open that door a little bit, it's so crazy. And you'll know this, as a paramedic and stuff, like, when you start to kind of learn the intricacies of the way that the heart works, and how people can go into, heart failure of all different types. And, a lot of times their heart will default into a different rhythm. You guys, like, that to me that's a miracle. Like, you explain that, right? Like, I mean, there's just, at some point, you're going to reach an end of the line where things just become unexplainable. Mm. That's God, and that's God. And I've just found, like, the more that my wife and I and my family, the more that we lean into that and trust his plan and try and be good soldiers, that my life is better, and that I just keep getting blessed. And man, and I think we all have those people. Maybe what I think about, like, when I was a little bit more cynical, that I used to have friends that were always happy. This is going to sound super bad, that I would resent them almost. I'm like, what are you so freaking happy about? But what, they do have something. They've got something figured out that the rest of us don't. Like, there's. Like, you have to intentionally do that.
Yeah. Well, it's just like anything, right? Like boxing or anything that you're doing. If you're not being intentional with putting that time in, you're only going to get, like, surface level. You're only going to get the very low hanging fruits. But I think one thing I don't want people to misinterpret is, when we have faith in God and God is at the core and center of who we are, it doesn't mean he's going to take all the bad away from us.
Right.
What it means is, if our faith is real and genuine, we're going to pour into him when we need him.
Right.
We're going to pour into him when we don't, quote unquote, need him, right? We're always going to put our full intention and everything that we are into our relationship with him, good and bad. And I think with Christianity in particular, a lot of people think, well, your God's so big and so mighty, but all this bad happens. Well, he's not making the bad happen. That's life. That's the world. That's human and free choice and will. But Christians struggle with things just as much as the next person.
Well, not only that too, like, I want people to know that, like, you're having we have a very interesting conversation, especially between the three of us, because you've had being in combat and having near-death experiences too. Yeah. You have three people that have had near-death experiences, three people that are believers, three people that have families, and all three of us are trying to be good Christians, good stewards of our life, and good dads. And all three of us have talked about, on air and off air, like, it doesn't mean that you're still not going to have bad days. Yeah. Like, you can literally almost die, and it's like, everybody gets that that fake thing where it's like, oh, if you have that near-death experience, then life is just rose-colored glasses all the time, and just because you're a Christian means that you're like not angry ever, and things don't piss you off, and you're not a jerk sometimes.
Right,
and
right.
Just because you're trying to be a good dude, good dad means that you have to be a good dude, good dad all the time, and you're like you never mess up, and if you do, then you're not really a good dude, good dad.
Right.
It's like, dude, I could be a Christian, I could be an almost died dad, and I can mess up all three of those at the same time in the same day within the same minute, and it's like. I had a moment like that yesterday, and I was sitting on the couch with my wife, and I was just like, am I doing all this wrong? Like, I was like, I was like, I am so defeated right now that I feel like I'm literally doing all of this wrong. I'm doing husbanding wrong, dadding wrong, business owning wrong, an employee wrong, everything. I feel like, and I was like, and I'm like not being a good steward of the miracle that I've been given of a second chance. Yeah. And she's like, it's okay to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I was like,
it's a lot of pressure.
It is.
It's a lot of pressure. My father-in-law, he makes a comment all the time. He's like, nobody wrote a book. Well, sure, there's tons of books, but there's not the book, right. And it's like, man, we're all pretty aligned, I think, morally, ethically. But even, the three of us would have varying ideas of how we're supposed to be. I'm sure we're doing things differently with the way that we're raising our kids because we're all just doing our best. You know? Like, you got this is kind of hopefully lighten the mood a little bit. But I remember you guys. I was working in retail a long time ago, and before ever having kids. And I remember seeing this mom walk in, and she had 2 kids, and they were on those like leashes. They're less popular now, you guys, but the kids were on the leashes, and they were like running around like the. I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like just control your, like this. Yeah. What do I know? But I remember thinking that, and fast forward to now, I have 2 little ones that you're like,
where's those leashes?
I'm on Amazon. I'm like, is there a 2-for-1 for those leashes? Like, do they have one with like a shock collar? Or, yeah. So I get it. And it's hard. And I think kind of going back to the other point of like the insecurity, like we have to constantly check in with ourselves, check in with our wife, make sure that we're doing the right thing, and it's funny because again the hat, the backstop, I've done a lot of that stuff with my tattoos,
Same.
and it's like before I kind of had that road rage incident or whatever, I'm like, oh wait, a lot of as silly as it sounds, my tattoos they'll reel me in. They're just they serve as reminders. Me being here today, I would hope kind of sets me up for a better week, like I'll be damned if I'm going to have any kind of road rage leaving here because you guys invited me on Good Dude, Good Dad. Yeah. So, I hope for anybody watching that, like, that resonates too. It's like, the great thing about life is like that every single day we get to wake up and pick who we want to be, and so some days we're not the best version of ourselves, and, hopefully we give ourselves a healthy little beat down for that and learn from it and pick up the pieces the next day and try and be better. But
that's what it's all about. And Shawn, thank you so much for sharing. We're gonna put your Instagram in the comments and stuff like that.
Cool.
What is your Instagram? Say it out loud in case somebody doesn't
I
read.
think it's Shawn Isbell _33.
Okay.
Something like that.
Do you have a separate one for real estate, or is it
I do. I have one. It's Isbell Realty Group. Okay. So, yep.
We'll make sure we put both of those. Dude, again, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I guarantee you people will be inspired from some part of your story. And that's why we're sitting in this room. That's why we all took time out of our life. We're not Joe Rogan. We ain't being paid to do this.
Yeah.
Our payment, and I know it sounds cheesy, and a lot of people out there probably won't fully believe me, but our payment lately for Jordan and I in putting the effort into this are the DMs that we get, the comments that we get, the people in person saying, hey, that was really cool hearing, so-and-so's story or your part of your story. And obviously, we want to make money eventually doing something like this, right? Yeah. But that's not why we're sitting here right this second. And to you, Mr. Jordan, you are doing things right. So if you have those doubts, that's totally okay, because as a man, you're going to have those. But working alongside of you for these last few months, you're letting the enemy creep into your mind when you don't need to. And so if you need to get punched, Shawn will do it.
Yeah.
Let's go.
With love punches.
I love getting punched in the face.
No, it's weird. Like, I know you're trying to send it off, but I just want to like, I'm big about the energy, and like you couldn't be any warmer of a guy. Like seriously,
thank you.
No, like it just makes sense that you're friends with Ben, because he's just like, like to know Ben is just to be his best friend, and I'm so honored to be here. you know, now I'll give you you're Joe Rogan 2.0, dude. You really are. You know why? Because your heart is always in the right place, dude. And so like this thing is going to, you know, maybe not today, but in short time is going to have a massive following. And it's because you guys, your heart is in the right place. The mission is pure. You know, you guys are really trying to make a difference. And this isn't, you know, cool guy hour. It's like, yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the vulnerability. You know, I'm somebody that can, you know, I'll cry all over the mic here, but I appreciate, you know, that you had some vulnerability too. Yeah. Cause that's real. That's what being an adult and being a dad actually is. It's hard. It's hard. And you know, like, dude, my buddy Justin just the other day sent me the most simple text message. You guys, you would have thought that he handed me a boatload of money, because he was just like, hey, dude, I love you, man. You know, not everybody always checks in with us. Just want to make sure you're good.
That's
like,
cool. Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, I'm thankful you started this, Jordan.
Yeah. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you guys for coming on.
You.
Appreciate it.
All right. Put it in the comments. Yeah. Anything else?
Nah. Remember, be a good dude.
Make it a great day, you guys.
There you go.
Let's go.
Oh, I love that ending.